Hi folks, so your exit ticket for today was to show me that you were able to use polynomial factorisation and polynomial division in order to solve a polynomial expression that's equal to 0. So here's our problem, our exit ticket from today, and I'm going to work through it so that you can check your answer and see how you went. So the first thing I'm going to do here is recognise that the skills that I need to solve an expression is I'm going to use the null factor law. And before I can use the null factor law, I have to factorise. And before I can factorise, I have to find one factor to start me off. And I'm going to use trial and error to find that factor. Now, it doesn't take a lot of sort of looking at this problem to work out, hey, if I try x equals 1, that'll give me an answer of 6 minus 5 minus 2 plus 1, and we can see that that equals 0. So the trial and error process here is actually really quite quick. So I'm going to use that and say, all right, well, therefore, I know that x minus 1 is a factor. Now, I can use sort of the inspection process, which is much shorter for finding the quadratic factors, but I'll use long division in this case because long division's a great fallback space for anyone who is having trouble. If you've got a shortcut method or you're doing this via inspection and you can do it quicker, awesome. Okay, so the first thing I do here is I say, what is 6x cubed divided by x? And that gives me an answer of 6x squared. So I put in the 6x squared up the top, and then I need to multiply that by the part that's in front, which gives 6x cubed minus 6x squared, and then I have to subtract these. 5x squared minus 6x squared is positive x squared, and I can bring down the negative 2x. Okay, so now what I want to do is what is x squared divided by x, and I know that that is equal to x. So I need to put in my plus x and then multiply that out the front, which gives me x squared minus x, and I need to subtract this from the previous expression, which gives me minus x, and then I bring down the positive 1. So now I need to do negative x divided by x, and that is equal to negative 1. So I put down my negative 1, and again, times it out the front. Negative 1 times x is negative x. Negative 1 times negative 1 is positive 1. And when I subtract these, I get an answer of 0. And that's perfect because that's a nice double check that the remainder was 0. Okay. So now I can say that 6x cubed minus 5x squared minus 2x plus 1 is the same as x minus 1 times 6x squared plus x minus 1, and it's the same as 0. So my next step is, now that I've got my first factor and I've done division, now I need to factorise the quadratic. Now again, some of you will have shortcut methods for doing this and you'll be able to do it via inspection. I'm going to work through the process that we spoke about in year 10, and that was, if I call this A, B and C, I'm going to start by doing A times B, which equals 6 times negative 1, which equals negative 6. So now I'm going to look for two numbers that multiply to equal negative 6, and the same two numbers that add to give me that b value, which is 1. And most of you will quickly come up, well, if I have 3 times negative 2, that equals negative 6, and 3 plus negative 2 is equal to positive 1. So my quadratic I can write as, so the 6x squared plus x minus 1 is the same as 6x plus 3 and 6x minus 2. But I've got a 6x in both of these, and if I do 6x times by 6x, that'll equal 36x squared. So I'm 6 times too big. So my trick here was divide this by 6. So this process is an algorithm that works. A lot of students that I taught last year really liked this process, which is why I'm using it again here. So I then factorise my first bracket, and I can take out 3 as a common factor. I factorise my second bracket, and I can take out 2 as a common factor. And what happens with that extra divide by 6 in this algorithm is those parts all cancel out, and I am left with the factorised quadratic of 2x plus 1 and 3x minus 1. Cool, so let's move on to my expression above. And so we can say now, all right, we were up to x minus 1 times 6x squared plus x minus 1. That's where I was up to. I can now actually rewrite that as x minus 1 times 2x plus 1 times 3x minus 1. And the whole thing is equal to 0. So my next step is to solve this using the null factor law. And the null factor law states that the only way I can multiply things together and get an answer of 0 is one of those things has to equal 0. So let's actually work through. Either the first factor is 0, so x minus 1 equals 0, and then I can solve this linear expression to say, well, then x has to equal 1, or my second linear factor has to equal 0, so 2x plus 1 equals 0, so 2x equals negative 1, or x equals negative 1 on 2, or my third linear factor has to equal 0. So 3x minus 1 equals 0, 3x equals 1, x equals 1/3. So finally, it's always a good idea to restate your solution. And I'm just going to say, therefore, 6x cubed minus 5x squared minus 2x plus 1 will equal 0 if x equals 1, negative 1/2, or 1/3. And I'm all done.